Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to this micro edition of Shift Happens, your apocalypse podcast. I'm Rob Thompson, CEO of 10th Human and an associate broker with the agency here in Colorado Springs. And I'm joined again by my buddy Jesse.
Hey, Jesse Campbell here, also associate broker here in Colorado Springs. CEO of nothing except for myself and maybe belligerent bystander, if anything else.
I think the CEO of yourself, that's like a big job.
That is a big job.
That is a big job. And
personal responsibility.
Exactly. Individual sovereignty. The reason today we mentioned the brokerage association is just because the conversation is going to center around real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesse and I were having a conversation a little bit ago, and I thought, this would be a great topic for a micro podcast. And specifically, we were talking about appraisers and the values here in Colorado Springs. Mm-hmm. As you probably know, anybody listening to this podcast, or if you don't, we've seen a 31.8% increase in the average sale price of homes here and there since March of 2015. Mm-hmm. And Jesse made a comment. What was your comment, Jesse?
I don't know how to make it short. Pretty much the appraisers are here as price controls ever since the housing bubble back in 07, 08, 09. Appraisers have been made mandatory for financing, especially for VA and FHA. And their function essentially is to make sure you're not, quote unquote, overpaying for your house. But what's happened here in Colorado Springs is lower income families with little to no cash to close are having a hard time buying right now because they can't write offers where in the additional provisions they can't offer cash over the appraised value of the home if the appraisal comes in low. And so listing agents right now don't want to accept a whole lot of offers without that, especially from financing options such as FHA and VA that have much more strict appraisal guidelines. So that I'd like to call that verification of the law of unintended consequences. The government really tried to come in and help out the lower income people, and it's actually de facto ruining the low income people. That's pretty much it.
So let's run through a scenario here. What are we talking about? So you have a $200,000 house. I'm a list agent. Mm-hmm. You, Jesse Campbell, submit an offer because $200,000 is a highly competitive price point in our market. Mm-hmm. You maybe offer $205,000. Mm-hmm. You have a financed buyer, 100% financing. They don't have cash to bring to the table. Mm-hmm. Buyer B comes in and says, "Here's a $210,000 cash." Mm-hmm. And what you're saying is that the law of unintended consequences as it applies here is that buyer A is now no longer competitive because maybe the comps on the house top out at $200,000. Yep. So in that scenario, the appraiser comes back and says, "Look, the comps don't support." Would come back and say the comparable sales don't support that $210,000, or maybe then you'd have to offer $210,000 or $220,000 or $230,000, maybe even for your buyer to be competitive and get awarded. But then the appraiser won't support that value because the comparables don't support that value. So therefore, the cash buyer wins, and so unintended consequences applies here in saying that rule may be meant to help the lower income families is actually icing them out of the market.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Actually just ran into this yesterday, almost the same exact scenario. House is listed at $200,000. We made a very competitive offer of $230,000 because there were 23 offers.
Wow, I called that, didn't I?
Yeah, there were 23 offers in 48 hours. And we were one of the top ones, but we lost out to an offer of, I think it was like $215,000. And they were willing, and the comps only supported $210,000, but they were willing to bring an extra $5,000 over the appraised value if the appraisal comes in low. And even though my buyer had offered $15,000 more and was perfectly ready, willing, and able to finance that kind of a purchase, they were rejected.
Because you have a quote, you have cash over the appraisal.
Exactly. And it's not that, that would have put them in a sticky situation either, because they're qualified for much, much, much more than that. It's just the issue is, and very rightly so, the listing agents, the ones working for the sellers, are concerned about the appraisals coming in what's called low tide in our industry, where it comes in lower, where now we have to go into a secondary or tertiary mode of negotiations more than likely the seller's going to have to eat that cost. And so they're just trying to represent their sellers. I'm just trying to represent my buyers. And we have a third party who's just trying to come in and do their job. There's no insidious attitudes towards anybody in this situation. It's
just the structure of
it's just what's happening, and there's not much to do about that.
So to clarify, in that situation, what we're saying is that buyer A, who could bring cash to closing, wins because the comparable sales don't support the higher 100% financed, no cash offer.
Yep.
Okay. So let me play devil's advocate for a second here. If we took away that check, wouldn't you just have unbound values? And if I could offer $240 on a house regardless of appraisal price and get 100% financing, would I not be, as a buyer's agent, then setting the person up for potential failure because then they're overpaying for the property?
Not necessarily, because appraisers may or may not take into consideration the offer. And so you got, just for example, like a 50-50 shot of them, we had gotten accepted our offer of $230. We got about a 50-50 shot, just for example, of that one being accepted. And we are perfectly willing and ready and able to go through and close with that. Because, my buyers still don't want to... they know what they want. They know what is over purchasing for them. They're looking at the house. They love it, but only to a certain dollar amount. What is happening, though, is people are throwing out ridiculous offers, knowing that the appraiser is probably going to come back and say no, but then probably they don't. And so now they're stuck overpaying for a house.
It's a good flip perspective. And what Jesse's stating there is, so see, this hypothetical $200,000 home, a strategy that has been employed in the market, we've both seen, is an agent comes in and offers $230, knowing that the comps maybe top out at $205. So knowing that they'll win potentially, unless the list agent and the seller are savvy to that strategy and understand and know that this is going to be an issue 3 weeks down the road. But anyway, buyer's agent comes in, possibly offers $30,000 above list, knowing that you're going to have to renegotiate appraisal. So they're just making any offer they can to win. No, but then what happens if the home appraises? Now the person potentially has overpaid.
Yep.
But aren't we flipping the argument on its head either too by saying that? What are we saying? The appraisers are a needed and necessary check, or?
I think that they should not be a necessary condition for financing. I think they should be made available, but I don't think that they should be using coercive force for financing. I think it's just like an inspector here in the great state of Colorado. We don't have to hire inspectors, but you really should hire an inspector.
That's an interesting compromise there. They shouldn't be a potential compromise would be, hey, here is our informed value. You're required to get an appraisal. You're required to be informed of what a third party believes is the market value of the property, but it's not necessarily a condition for financing.
Yeah, I don't think it should be a condition for financing. I think, even with the inspector, even though it's not required for financing, you do still have in our contracts an inspection objection date where you can still terminate if you're not satisfied with the condition of the home. And we do have an appraisal objection date as well, where if it weren't made required, you could still object if someone with a clipboard came in and said, probably not. But then even if they did come in and say, oh, this is too high, maybe they could still agree to pay that amount.
They could override the objection.
They could override the objection or the appraisal. Yeah.
That's an interesting thing. That's an interesting perspective and an interesting compromise. Well, there you have it. So this has been that is my little girl in the background. But
we are both dads, so get used to it.
One second, little mama. Okay, so this has been your TBD micro version of the Shift Happens Apocalypse podcast. We just wanted to have a conversation and talk about an interesting law of unintended consequences regarding appraisals. Any last words?
My undergrad is in political science. I know what I'm talking about. No, I'm just kidding. No, that's about it.
Right on. Well, thanks, Jesse.
Thank you, sir.
Talk to you later, man.
Yes, sir.
Bye.